that work, now rock out. Trent Harvey, I got that work, now rock out.
Episode 6, the Houston Comets Dynasty. The first dynasty in the WNBA and the first big three on a roster in the WNBA as well. So we're going to start with that first season, 1997. And to get in 1997, they started with 8 teams. And building the rosters for those 8 teams was done in 3 parts. The first part, they had 16 of the best players that they had compiled, and 2 per team. So each team started with the 2 from that list of 16. The second part was another kind of elite draft with another bunch of players that either won medals or won in college, and some of the other professional leagues that were happening at the time. And then they also did an actual draft, which the first initial WNBA draft actually went 4 rounds. That's a lot of rounds, and that's a lot of players. So before the draft, they actually did a pre-draft camp. I believe it was in Florida as well, so that staffs can see these players play. Because of course at that time, players were kind of scattered all over the place. People were playing overseas. People were still playing in college. Some people were playing here. So they did a pre-draft camp to kind of bring everybody in one place, and coaches could see players compete amongst the best. And then they did 4 rounds of a WNBA draft. So that's how the teams were compiled that first season in 1997. And we know all the kind of the big faces from that first season was Cheryl Swoops, Rebecca Lobo, Lisa Leslie, Tina Thompson, Teresa Weatherspoon. So some of those were the more household names that first year. In that first year, 8 teams. The playoffs were each 1 game, so there were no series that first year, 1997. But 1997 was won by the Houston Comets. The coach was Van Chancellor. Cynthia Cooper won the MVP and the Finals MVP. And they had the big 3, but Swoops did not play until kind of the end of the season into the playoffs because she had just had a baby. So that first year, they kind of really weren't the big 3 yet, even though all 3 were on the roster. And that first year, 1997, they had a record of 18-10, and they defeated New York for that first championship. So this was kind of the beginning of that Houston-New York rivalry that probably went on for like their first, I would say, at least 5 or 6 years of the league. The roster in 1997 was Jeanette Arcane, Cynthia Cooper, Pietra Gay, Wanda Guyton, Fran Harris, Tammy Jackson, Yolanda Moore, Kim Perrott, Katarina Pellini, Cheryl Swoops, Tina Thompson, and Tiffany Wosley. So they were that first champion. Cynthia Cooper was that first MVP. Other awards that first year, Defensive Player of the Year was Teresa Weatherspoon for the New York Liberty, and Van Chancellor won Coach of the Year. And so the list of awards was smaller that first year as well. So obviously, as the league progressed, more awards became a yearly thing. But those were the main ones, and that was that initial 1997 season, that first championship for the Houston Comets. Then we go to 1998. The league expanded from 8 teams to 10 teams. So now there's 2 additional teams for them to fight for a spot in the playoffs and repeat as champions. And in 1998, they went 27-3, and they beat Phoenix in the finals. The 2 teams that were added in 98 were the Washington Mystics and the Detroit Shock. So they got an even better record that second year, where this is when we really got to see the big 3 and Cynthia Cooper, Cheryl Swoops, and Tina Thompson. And it's crazy that they were able to keep that core for so long and just maintain success. And I think keeping a core like that would be much harder now, especially with the salary cap, roster spots, and just how much more of the league there is. But the fact that they were able to keep this core for so long and maintain success it's going to be hard to see that again. And if you've noticed, most teams have gone. We've had a couple teams do back-to-back champions, but doing 3 or 4 championships in a row, I don't know if we're going to see that again. I honestly don't. But that was 97, 98, 8 teams in 97, 10 teams in 1998. Now, in 1999, we saw another expansion, and at this point, we ended up going to 12 teams. So in 1999, we added Orlando Miracle and the Minnesota Lynx. In 1999, the Comets went 26-6, and again, they faced New York in the finals. 1999 is the year of the shot by Teresa Weatherspoon. This was a 3-game series in the finals that was very, very entertaining to watch as a fan between Houston and New York. And a little later, we'll watch highlights and see all these things on film. But that 1999, the league is up to 12 teams. Houston finishes 26-6. And they defeat New York in the finals. Right. Now, that 4th championship, they still got Van Chancellor as coach. They still got their core 3. And a couple other pieces that have been on the team for quite some time. And in 2000, the league added 4 teams in 2000. Indiana Fever, Miami Soul, Portland Fire, and the Seattle Storm. So now the league is up to 16 teams. Houston's record that year, 27-5. And again, they defeated New York in the finals. So that's why I said that first, I would say 6 to 8 years, there was a rivalry between Houston and New York, and then there was also a rivalry between Houston and LA. And I miss those rivalries. Those were some really, really good games, regular season and postseason. But Houston's dominance, even as the league was expanding each year, those first couple years, even though they were adding more and more teams, Houston was still dominating all the teams by keeping their core and continually to build around that each year and just maintaining success. Like I said, I don't think 4 championships in a row is going to happen again. If it does, that's going to be insane. But I don't think we're going to see it again. We've seen a couple teams get back-to-back champions over the course of the league, but seeing a team get 4 ever again in history is going to be insane. So I don't know if that's going to happen. That'll be interesting if it ever does. But we still got to get another three-peat, because right now I don't think we have another three-peat. We have other people that have 3 championships, but definitely not a three-peat. But the Comets definitely dominated. I would say that first. I would even put the couple years after that, even though they didn't win the championship, they were still like an elite team and still had to be knocked out and be beat. So the Comets were definitely dominant for like probably the first 6 years of the league, where you had to knock them off or they were just going to dominate. They dominated in awards, MVPs, Coach of the Year, sportsmanship awards, all those things. And they just sustained excellence. Like, winning 4 championships in a row at the professional level is insane. Insane. A 4-peat is absolutely insane. And that year 2000, I think 16 teams was our cap, and we've definitely lost quite a few teams since then. And right now we're back on the upswing. So we went down and then just stayed steady at 12 for quite some time, but we're definitely back on the incline as far as expansion and getting more players and more teams in the league. So it's very, very exciting to see us back on a path of expansion. But I wanted to do an episode on the Comets because there is a lot of new fans coming to the sport, to the league, and sadly the Comets arena is no longer in existence. So their banners and all that stuff is not hanging anywhere for someone to see, and to see that history, and see one of the greatest teams to lay the foundation for the league with some of the greatest players to lay the foundation for the league. And so I thought it was important to have an episode talking about them, talking about their accomplishments, and just making sure we don't forget the foundation of this league as it continues to grow and become more popular and get more fans. It's important for the fans and the players to know where the success of today came from, who started that journey, and who was fighting for kind of where we are in today's game for women's sports, for women's basketball. And so the Houston Comets were a huge piece of that foundation, and showing their competitiveness, their hard work, their teamwork, and showing sustained excellence as an organization and as a team, from top to bottom. Houston was a really good example of putting a team together for success and kind of keeping it successful for years upon years. And obviously their being disbanded was a lot to do with financial things. And as much as people don't really probably want to get into it, those early years in the league, we all know that the league wasn't really making as much money to kind of sustain certain things. And so unfortunately, I think the Comets became a casualty to that. And it's very unfortunate because, as I said, like, we don't have anywhere to go to see the history of this team, see their success, see their stories, like any stories from any of the players, not just their big three, but all the players that have been on their teams, on their coaching staff, Like, there's no place that we can go and just immerse ourselves in all of it. There's nowhere for anybody to retire a player's jersey. Obviously, before they were, Kemper Ross' jersey was in the rafters, but she passed. In that third year that they won the championship, she was their point guard, and she passed. And it was their campaign was 3 for 10. Her number was 10, so they were going for championship number 3 for 10. And so that was a really tough season for that team, those players, that organization, because a lot of the players on that roster would tell you how big of a piece she was to their success and kind of keeping the big three on the same page when each of them in their own right could have been the MVP in any season. But a lot of them talk about how important her role was to that team, and when they lost her, fighting through that third season to win that third championship for her. That was a very crazy season to watch, emotional season as a fan, because you get used to seeing these players, hearing about these players, and to see a team lose somebody during the season can get very emotional for everybody. But they ended up winning again, and that was the three-peat. And obviously they went on to win the fourth one after that as well. So, but they're definitely a huge piece of the foundation for the WNBA, and I think it's up to the fans and the players of the league to make sure all of these beginning pieces aren't forgotten or lost out in the air somewhere, but that somebody's keeping that information and talking about them and kind of keeping that alive for those players and for those teams. Because I will cover the other teams that have been disbanded as well, but I had to start with the first dynasty in the W and the first big three. They were the big three before we were calling super teams and whatever we call everything now. So they were definitely the first in the WNBA, and they were very, very fun to watch, and they did a lot for the game, for the league, for fans. And I really wish that at that point in time, I would have been able to go to a game in Houston, because that arena always looked like it was popping. Them fans were excited to be there, and they showed it. So it's unfortunate that their team and their arena is not around anymore. So hopefully at some point we'll create a space that has kind of the foundation of the WNBA, kind of like the Women's Hall of Fame. Hopefully at some point the W can have a place that people can go and kind of see memories, jerseys, shoes on display that kind of shows the path of the W from 1996-97 to current. So hopefully at some point that does happen, because I think there needs to be a place for the rich history of the league, the teams that started, that original 8 teams that got the league started, and then where the league has gotten from there. So hopefully at some point something like that will come about. But for now, it's up to us as fans and as players to continue to talk about these teams and show their videos, show support, whatever way we can. So that's why this has an episode and a segment of its own, a huge piece of the foundation Houston Comets, the only team to win 4 straight championships. And then the first big three, Cynthia Cooper, Cheryl Swoops, Tina Thompson. That was the first big three in the WNBA. And they were fantastic. And as I said, at any season, any one of those three could have been the MVP. I know Cynthia Cooper won it their first 2 seasons, so 97, 98, I believe 99 was Cheryl Swoops was 99. Actually, no, 99 was Yolanda Griffith. And then in 2000, that's when Swoops won the MVP. So 97, Cynthia Cooper won MVP. 98, Cynthia Cooper won MVP again. And then in 99, Yolanda Griffith won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. And then in 2000, Swoops did the same thing that Yo-Yo did. She won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. So that means Yolanda Griffith was the first to win MVP and Defensive Player the same year. And then Swoops did the same thing the next year. That's pretty cool. So, there's a lot of dominance by the Houston Comets and the players, the coach. The coach won Coach of the Year multiple times as well. But a huge piece of the foundation of the WNBA. And they laid a great foundation. So, but that is the Houston Comets and their dominance. And so it was great to watch. Of course, I still got my Cheryl Swoops jersey because she was my favorite player. Still is one of my favorite my favorite players of all time. I actually have one of her jerseys in a frame as well, and so I'm gonna get that up on the wall pretty soon. But I'm working on trying to get it signed before I officially put it on the wall. And then a few years after Cynthia Cooper retired, I got a picture with her at a Mystics game, so I got to meet her and chat with her, and that was amazing. So that's my picture with Cynthia Cooper. And then Michelle Snow, who was also on the Comets for a few years, I met her at a basketball camp. And of course, I look like a little midget next to her because she's tall as heck. But I've always tried to meet players if I could, take a picture or get an autograph or just have a conversation. I have quite a few pictures with Cheryl Swoops as well, but I didn't have the pictures uploaded because I actually met Cheryl Swoops at the All-Star game last summer in Phoenix. Had a nice conversation with her then. So I've had some great opportunities to meet and talk with some of the players that I enjoyed watching and experience that. And they were definitely a blast to watch. And hopefully I can get the other one signed. As I said, I got one of hers already in the frame. Hopefully I'm able to get this signed at some point and I can put it on the wall. And then I got my picture with Cynthia Cooper, so I got some great stuff. Being a fan for such a long time, I definitely have some great stuff. Still working on some stuff, but I've definitely had my fair share of meetings with players and conversations with players that I love. So it's been a great journey so far. It's going to keep going, of course. There's a lot more coming with the league expansion again. So very, very, very excited. Very, very excited for you guys for tuning in for episode 6, the Houston Comets Dynasty. And to recap, we discussed the first season was 1997. They developed the teams in 3 parts. The first part was they had a list of 16 players. They allocated 2 per team since there was 8 teams to start the league. The second part was an elite draft from medalists, NCAA champions, the elite list of players from overseas as well. They did a pre-draft camp, and then they finished with an actual WNBA draft, which went 4 rounds. And that 97 draft, the first round, you had Tina Thompson went number 1 to Houston. Pamela McGee went to Sacramento at number 2. At number 3, LA took Jamila Wideman. At number 4, Cleveland took Eva Nemkova. Utah took Tammy Rice. New York took Sue Wicks. Charlotte took Tora Suba. And Phoenix took Tony Foster. So that's the original 8 teams of the WNBA. Houston, Sacramento, LA, Cleveland, Utah, New York, Charlotte, and Phoenix. That's the original 8. That was the 8 picks in the 97 draft. So Houston's record in 1997, 18-10 amongst the 8 teams. In the finals, they defeated New York for the first championship of the WNBA, the first championship for the Houston Comets. That year, Cynthia Cooper won MVP and Finals MVP. And that team, amongst that team with Cooper, was Janeth Arcane, Kim Perrott, Cheryl Swoops, Tina Thompson, Fran Harris, Wanda Guyton, Tammy Jackson, Yolanda Moore, Tiffany Wosley, Katarina Pellini, and Petra Gay. So that was that first championship squad of the WNBA, the first ever championship. In 1998, the Houston Comets went on to repeat that championship, going 27-3, even though the league added 2 additional teams in 1998, the Washington Mystics and the Detroit Shock. The Comets finished 27-3, and Cooper won MVP again in 1998. In that finals, they defeated Phoenix. So, year 1999, Comets looking to 3-peat, which is insane. But the league expanded with 2 more teams. They had Orlando and Minnesota. 1999, their record was 26-6. And again in the finals, they faced the New York Liberty. 3-game series. Game 2 produced the shot by Teresa Weatherspoon, who on Houston's court, she sent them to Game 3 for their chance to dethrone the Houston Comets. Unfortunately, the Comets won Game 3, 3-peat. The campaign 3 for 10, which was in reference to Kim Perrott, who lost her battle with lung cancer that year. So that third season was for Kim Perrott. So it was a tough season for Houston Comets, emotionally, physically, and they came out on top and got that 3-peat. 3 years in a row, first 3 years of the league, Comets champions. And that year, somebody else won MVP, Yolanda Griffith for Sacramento, but the Comets still maintained their dominance. Now we got the year 2000. Comets, the league expanded with 4 more teams. Indiana, Miami, Portland, Seattle. In 2000, we added 4 teams. So now there's 16 teams in the league. Houston Comets record in 2000, 27-5. And 2000 was one of the best years for Cheryl Swoops. From start to finish, she won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the year 2000. But once again, the Comets and New York Liberty meet in the finals, and the Comets win again. So that means 4 straight championships out the gates in the WNBA, with a core team that remained the same all 4 years. Same coach, Coach Van Chancellor. All while the league was expanding, the Comets were still dominating in their first 4 years. Like I said, I don't think there will ever be a team to win 4 straight. We've had several teams win back-to-back, but we have not seen a 3-peat nor a 4-peat since then. I don't know if we ever will, but, you know, time will tell. Time will tell. But the Houston Comets dynasty definitely set a foundation for the WNBA, a foundation for consistent winning, consistent excellence. It's unfortunate that the team is not around anymore, but we must continue to talk about it and appreciate that foundation that they set for the league, along with the other original 8 teams to start the WNBA, because it is the foundation. So we have to not let the fan base as an entirety to forget where the league came from and how different it is, the improvements, and also look back into things that we can continue to do for the players and for the league. But like I said, this is a huge foundation piece for the leagues. The Houston Comets, their dynasty, their big 3, Tina Thompson, Cynthia Cooper, Cheryl Swoops, the first big 3 in the league, to stay together and maintain excellence for years, and just continuing to put on a great product when it came to women's basketball. And it was definitely a pleasure and a privilege to be able to see that growing up as a young girl, watching just how much work that these women were putting into the game, and actually being able to see it on TV and physically go to a game and see it live. That visibility for a young girl at that time was huge. So we owe a great deal of where we are today to those teams from those first few years of the league. So we can't let them be forgotten. Even if they don't have an arena anymore, we can't let these teams be forgotten. And we will cover the other teams as well in future episodes. But today was about the Houston Comets dynasty and what they've accomplished in those first few years of the league. So, as always, the goal of Welcome Home and Lady Blue Flames is to educate, appreciate, support, and promote women's sports. Again, the goal of this show and myself: educate, appreciate, support, and promote women's sports. Thank you for tuning in. Episode 5, Houston Comets Dynasty.